Now we have Olga talking. So she was here the entire afternoon as MC presenting our panelists. But now it's my turn to present her to the speech. So let's give a short applause to Olga. Acquiring the future in the strategic role of merging and acquisition in fintech payments industry consolidation. Wow, what a long title.
Just acquiring the future then.
Yeah, definitely.
Just let's acquire something.
Okay, tell us how we can do a merger and acquisition in the blockchain ecosystem, okay? Thank you, Olga.
Thank you for introduction. Yeah, it's a sort of transition already to present my annual research here in Naples. So this time, yeah, perhaps just waiting for a second for the slides. And yeah, meanwhile, I will represent what I found in terms of trends of M&A, especially, of course, targeting fintech. And that was very helpful to listen also previously to Francesco to understand what was in DeFi world. And now I will target like more all the digital asset space and of course the convergence with traditional finance as it should be. So yeah, derivatives wouldn't be touched anymore. We'll go to. Okay, nice. Yeah, as Jan said, it was a bit long title for acquiring the future and all the strategic things. Second. Yeah. So let me present also briefly myself. I'm mostly working with these two companies, or one is association, and I have my fellow peers here as well listening to me. So first, Hercle, I'm leading business operations there. Hercle is an infrastructure for cross-border payments, so basically facilitating all the money movement. And here you already can see my interest in exploring how payments are evolving in the last years. And the second one, I'm the co-founder and co-president of Blockchain Student Association Italy. We're the closest partner of the European Association as well. So we're trying to make this gap between university and the real world of business. And also, I just finished my master in corporate finance in Bocconi, what surged significantly my interest in M&A and all the finance-related world. So let's go. That's very simple. I wouldn't, of course, dive into details of the payments, but just to get some background understanding. What was pre-fintech is T+3, I don't know, T+2 settlement, and plus 3% of the fees when we're traveling all the way from point A to point B. And what happened in the fintech era? We don't have even intermediaries. So it's almost 0% cost, and it's instant settlement, which is facilitated usually just by one intermediary, for instance, taking the funds from point B and transporting them to the end. Oops, something not working, yeah. And from that, of course, we went to discover what is actually happening in the world of the fintech, as of course everyone knows that there are major acquisitions happening, and main companies, I don't know, MasterCard, to name the last ones, is acquiring the smaller fintechs. So basically, what are the real strategic rationales behind those acquisitions? We can first deep dive into the old payment stack. As anticipated, the main issue here is that we have all the systems as such as CHAPS as SEPA developed in 1970s, so that's quite many years ago, I would say, and famous T+1, T+2 settlement, which is of course making the payments inefficient. Second of all, we have the huge cost of it, because as World Bank is reporting, we have from 6 to 9% of the cost in 2017, and we had the target set to be achieved by 2030 of 3%. And honestly, in some quarters, especially in emerging ones, we're still not at this point. So that's a huge issue as for the businesses, also for the end users, because they're ultimately facing all these fees when they're sending money abroad. And that's one of the main points when you have huge remittance flow and a huge globalization flow, when we're not usually living in our own countries. So also, is here anyone from Italy? Okay, only one person. So we're all internationals. Of course, that's the conference. Yeah, but still, that's a lot of traveling happening. So I said, yeah, about G20 targets. And another huge main point is the pre-funding. So how international payments are working. We have different banks involved, and to make the payment and to pay in one country in the second, usually companies before tended to pre-fund their accounts in the country B, so to facilitate this payment. And that's a huge cost. As you see, business reporting again, 2 to 5% of transaction, which is resulting as lost capital in a sense. So what happened? Here I outlined 5 layers which, in my opinion, are the ones where the fintech actually changed something. And also the 5 names of the companies, and let me begin then to explain one by one. Layer 1, which is the acceptance. That's the foundation for all the payments, for all the money movement. And here we have, again, this famous 1970s, like last century, developed systems, which were inefficient. It was like a batch transactions settling 1-2 days later, encountering the costs. Here we have Stripe, which revolutionized everything. Basically, the proposition was very simple. Before, you needed to have a big tech team to integrate everything, to onboard all your merchants, and so on. So again, costs, and I will repeat it all over this presentation, because that's ultimately what business cares about. And Stripe just provided us with very simple integration methodology. It's only about like few rows, which you can integrate and accept the payments. Later we go to the second layer with the company Nexi, which is a famous European company, already using M&A to emerge, because it was integrating different smaller businesses to create this unique network to transport the payments all across European Union. And the most importantly, have the direct implementation into all the European rails. So Nexi is capable to transmit the information without relying on any other intermediaries, being basically this like umbrella aggregating all the more local methods. Third layer is custody. I would say custody just to be a bit, more digital assets in terms. But here I would also refer to the traditional banking, because banking circle, which is I'm providing here, is very famous in the Web3 space, as it manages to provide this access and bridge, I would say, between traditional world and DeFi world, by accepting the merchants, by accepting like fintechs who want to do payouts at almost zero cost and to deliver it instantly again. So that's about Rails optimization here. The fourth layer, here I'm going to mention my company, because that's FX and liquidity. And FX and liquidity is a huge point. Also, if you know the story of Revolut, the initial idea of their founder was to optimize the FX. Because that's not okay that banks have one rate and we have completely different points as end customers when we're doing the conversions between different currencies. So here we encounter stablecoin rails as instance, which helps us optimize and leverage on the liquidity. So basically we are not referring to the banks themselves anymore, but we are going to the intermediaries as Hercle in that case, which can help us deliver the liquidity instantly and make it at almost zero cost, because we are relying on the DeFi stack here. And the last is the infrastructural rails. And here I mentioned Tron, because Tron, compared to the classical SEPA or the classical SWIFT, will show you this difference between T+2 settlement and single-digit cost, and almost 0% and 1 to 5, I don't know, depends of course on the network, but in case of Tron, instant settlement. And also to reflect, Tron processed $8 trillion of volume in the last 12 months in 2025. So that's a big number. Now that we broke down all these layers, so the 5 that I mentioned, we're moving to the narrative. Everyone saw this, like routers, CNBC, the blog. Acquisitions, acquisitions, acquisitions. And the numbers are astonishing, isn't it? Like $1.8 billion paid for the company. That's crazy. Of course, we have the smaller ones, but that's a huge number. Here I provided also the statistics on M&A. M&A began roughly in 2020 as like the major trend. Here I focused on the last years because the trend was going up. Later we had the famous FTX crisis. So in 2022, it was a bit on the pause, as I can say. And again in 2023, we began to observe the trend, which you see is of course going a bit down and up. But majorly in 2025, we're seeing these amazing numbers, which were never faced by the industry. So we can ask ourselves what's actually happening, why we spend so much in mergers and acquisitions, and why we do not develop anything internally. Or better, we develop, but we prefer to acquire the companies. And here, as I said, that's the first wave, wave one. In my opinion, we can distinguish the M&A between two periods. The first one, which is I'm representing here, is the scale consolidation. So here the companies are mainly focusing on the cost synergies across 2 to 5 years, or 3 to 5 years. We are facing 20 to 30% cost reduction, just because driven that we can reduce some functions and converge them into the one single entity. So multiples, as you see here, are roughly 15-20x EV over EBITDA. That's still already a very, very huge valuation, I would say. And companies are acquiring all the existing clients and existing infrastructure to make them bigger and to reduce the costs. That's the narrative. Later, from 2021 onwards, and that's the phase where we are now, we have second wave of capabilities acquisition. Capabilities acquisition is not anymore about scale. It's not anymore me acquiring the company just because we can become huger and we cut the costs. If you will look also at examples of these companies, so of course, yeah, I listed the major ones. Bridge, BVNK are very famous, but we have also the companies at early stages. So we even would better evaluate them at revenues, and we would better see what are the premium drivers here. So it's not anymore about the costs. Do you see? It's stablecoin infrastructure. It's all about regulation or other factors. So here, famous example, MasterCard and BVNK. Series B raised in 2024 December, 140% valuation difference 1 year after, when we're acquiring at 1.8 billion. So that's huge. And here I listed also 3 main drivers here, premiums of this valuation. Control premium, of course, because we just raised the round, so there are many ownerships included, and we need to undertake them all and replace. Strategic synergy, because MasterCard wanted this access to stablecoin rails and all the infrastructure that BVNK had developed by the time, and that was a huge one. And the third one is urgency premium. We have Visa. We have MasterCard and Visa competing basically between them. So either MasterCard acts now, either it won't have any opportunity later on. Here I listed 4 strategic drivers of payments, and that you will basically see in every M&A transaction. First of all, mentioned is the technological capability. We are saving 2 to 3 years of internal developments by just acquiring the company. So I have this ready stack and I integrate it. The second is the regulatory. Licensing is everything. Everywhere you will go, also in this conference, you will hear everyone talking about licensing, especially yes, especially you. It's a huge problem, and not every company can wait until they get a proper license, so they prefer to cut this way and just go directly. Client base, which is still a major thing, then the company wants to expand, and here I can make an example of Coinbase and Deribit. So when Coinbase wanted to expand on the derivatives offering, they acquired the biggest exchange, which had the biggest client base there, to put it all under their umbrella. And the last one is, of course, the last but not least, I can say even like that, is the company and all the talent inside it. because the talent is something that we can bring in and start developing and start growing together. So the expertise of founders in this field is something what can never be in traditional finance. Of course, we have risks. Risks related to all this wave. First one, acquisition window is limited. That's what I mentioned. We have a bunch of companies, but the best ones are already being acquired. And if we want to act, we need to act now. The second is integration model adaptability. If you will see the last acquisitions, the companies are not always integrated fully, but sometimes they are put like aside. So, of course, BVNK, for instance, by MasterCard, yeah, Bridge with Stripe, they are still put a bit to the side and not fully integrated just because it will first trigger, for instance, regulatory points, and the second one, the team. Not all the team from major fintechs are capable of functioning within the major companies with all the legacy problems. And execution risks. So large-scale integrations are increasing, of course, this appetite for future acquisitions, and that's this like circle which is going, and every time it's getting bigger and bigger. So of course we sort of moving in the direction that we need to do something now. Here also a snapshot on regulatory environments. As I mentioned, that's mainly US, and the main, of course, yeah, Clarity Act, Genius Act. So I would not repeat, I'm not illegal, but just, I mean, to mention that's really crucial stuff the companies are looking at. And the famous MICA, especially in Italy, we have many issues related, and companies are very actively looking for some targets they can acquire and get this license ready. And of course, all the discussion about the CBDCs is not the last one. CBDCs can be seen as a substitute, or can be seen as something additional to the traditional DeFi system. So here the companies are trying to monitor it closely, whether we would collaborate with the government and with all the players of this ecosystem, or whether it will be like a different model of substitution, as I can say. Just to make the outline, regulatory license, established client base, minimum viable scale, which is essential in this second M&A wave, and the product efficiency. That creates the perfect target. If you have 4 of them, I guess one of major brands may approach your company in the next months and ask some potential interesting questions regarding that. I will just leave you with this phrase. Talking to many practitioners from the field, talking to many companies, and seeing the already numbers from the last years, I would say the next 24 months are the ones that will define the next trends, because the best companies will be acquired, so those that have capabilities, and you see every day news, just yesterday, again, one M&A, tomorrow will be another one, so that's a huge trend, and I believe that in 2 years, we'll actually have the market trend sort of defined. So that was it. Again, here are the main 2 logos you need to remember and associate, I would say, with me, Hercule and Blockchain Student Association Italy. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me also here, of course, in the event. And happy to stay in touch. Hope this was helpful. Open to the questions.